Hey everyone, and today I'm sharing an incredible story about how an ordinary-looking man turned an uncomfortable moment into a powerful lesson about respect and humility. It all started on a typical Friday evening at the Silver Oak, one of LA's most luxurious restaurants. The recently renovated dining room buzzed with activity, young tech moguls in designer suits, social media influencers snapping pictures of their gold leaf desserts, and old money families maintaining their weekly traditions. Among them sat a man in a simple gray polo shirt and casual slacks, quietly sipping whiskey at his usual corner table. Most of the veteran staff recognized him. Of course, how could they not? But 6 months ago, when Oliver Hayes, the man in the polo shirt, quietly purchased the Silver Oak, he had given the staff strict instructions: treat him like any other customer during his periodic quality checks. To Oliver, the true measure of a restaurant wasn't how they treated celebrities, but how they treated everyday people. Emma, the restaurant's newest waitress, didn't know any of this. Fresh out of a prestigious hospitality school and building her own food influencer following, she spent her shift alternating between fawning over social media personalities and casting disdainful glances at the underdressed man in her section. Thomas, the longtime manager, watched nervously from across the room. He'd seen that look in Emma's eyes before, the same look she'd given a retired teacher last week who dared to wear loafers instead of formal shoes. But tonight was different. Tonight her judgment would carry consequences she couldn't imagine. As Emma's clicking heels approached Oliver's table, Thomas held his breath. The veteran staff tensed, recognizing the calm before a storm. The quiet man in the polo shirt just took another sip of his whiskey, that familiar half-smile playing at the corner of his mouth. Emma positioned herself at the table, her iPhone partially visible in her apron pocket, her practiced smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Sir, I couldn't help but notice you've been nursing that house whiskey for quite a while now." Oliver looked up, meeting her gaze with the same steady calm that had faced down countless boardrooms over the decades. "It's a good whiskey." "Perhaps," Emma continued, her tone dripping with fake concern. "You'd be more comfortable at the bar. We're expecting several reserved parties. And this table," she gestured to the pristine white tablecloth, "is typically for our dining guests." Miguel, a young busboy who had immigrated from Mexico 2 years ago and worked tirelessly to support his family, overheard the exchange while clearing a nearby table. He knew exactly who the man in the polo shirt was. He'd seen every Oliver Hayes documentary with his father growing up. His hands tightened around the bus tub, fighting the urge to say something. "I'm comfortable here," Oliver replied simply, taking another unhurried sip. Emma's professional veneer cracked slightly. She glanced at her watch, then at a group of young tech executives waiting by the host stand. "Sir, our executive chef prepares a very exclusive menu. The prices," she paused meaningfully, eyeing his casual attire, "reflect the caliber of our establishment." At the next table, an older couple who'd been regulars for 20 years shifted uncomfortably. The husband started to speak up, but his wife touched his arm, recognizing the look in Oliver's eyes, the same look that had preceded some of his most famous public addresses. "I'm aware of the prices," Oliver said quietly, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly tone that had commanded respect in countless rooms. "And the chef's work." Emma's smile vanished completely now. She pulled out her order pad with sharp, irritated movements. "Well then, sir, shall I explain our menu?" Slowly. "Perhaps?" The last words carried a distinct jab at his age. Miguel, still nearby, couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped forward, his voice quiet but determined. "Miss Emma, maybe I should get Thomas. Stay out of this." Emma snapped at him. "Go bus tables. That's what you're here for." She turned back to Oliver, who had watched the exchange with particular interest in Miguel's attempt to help. "Now, sir, one last time." Her voice rose enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "This isn't some diner off the highway. This is the Silver Oak. Perhaps in your day, things were different, but now we have standards." Oliver set his whiskey down slowly, deliberately. The movement was subtle, but somehow commanded more attention than Emma's outburst. A few of the older patrons recognized it, the same measured calm before some of his most impactful moments. In my day, he repeated softly, one eyebrow rising slightly. Yes, your day, Emma continued, doubling down. When people could just walk in anywhere, dress however they wanted, order the cheapest drink, and take up space meant for real customers. Emma was fully committed now. Months of bottled-up disdain for unfashionable customers pouring out. Times have changed. This is a luxurious environment for people who appreciate modern luxury. Modern luxury, Oliver repeated thoughtfully, as if testing the words. And what exactly does that mean to you, Emma? The use of her name caught her off guard. She wasn't wearing a name tag, but she recovered quickly, assuming he'd overheard another server use it. It means, she declared, understanding that some places aren't for everyone. Our clientele expects a certain ambience. She gestured toward a group of young entrepreneurs taking selfies with their gold leaf desserts. They get it. They respect what the silver oak represents. They're not here pretending to be something they're not. The irony of her statement hung in the air. A few veteran servers exchanged knowing looks. Thomas was now just steps away, his face pale. Pretending, Oliver mused, that familiar half-smile returning. Interesting choice of words. Listen, Emma snapped, her patience finally exhausted. I've tried to be polite, but you clearly don't belong here. This isn't some set for one of those old movies. This is a prestigious establishment, and I won't have you ruining the experience for our real guests. The moment the words left her mouth, Thomas froze mid-step. Miguel dropped his bus tub with a crash that echoed through the suddenly silent restaurant. The older couple at the next table audibly gasped, but Oliver's expression didn't change. He just reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and made a single call. Jerry, could you bring me the ownership papers? Yes, right now. And the renovation plans we discussed last week. He set the phone down and looked back at Emma, who was starting to sense that something was very wrong. You see, Emma, he continued in that same quiet voice, I've been coming here every Friday for the past 6 months, sitting at the same table, ordering the same whiskey. Want to know why? Emma's face had begun to pale, the implications slowly dawning on her. Because 6 months ago, I bought this restaurant, not for the prestige, not for the modern luxury, but because for 50 years, the Silver Oak represented something real, a place where genuine hospitality meant treating everyone with respect, regardless of what they wore or how many followers they had. The silence in the restaurant was absolute. You could have heard a napkin drop. Jerry, the restaurant's longtime accountant, appeared moments later with a leather portfolio. He nodded respectfully at Oliver, handed him the documents, and stepped back, trying to hide a smile. Emma stood frozen, her order pad hanging limply at her side. The reality of her situation hit her in waves, each realization worse than the last. She'd not only insulted a customer, she'd insulted Oliver Hayes. And not just any customer, but her own boss. Mississippi, Oliver said, his voice carrying that familiar tone of authority that had commanded respect for decades. Let me tell you a story about this place. He gestured around the dining room. 50 years ago, I came here for the first time. Wasn't famous yet. Wasn't anybody. Wore a shirt pretty much like this one. The owner back then, Mr. Thompson, treated me like I was the most important guest he'd ever had. Not because of who I was, but because that's how he treated everybody. He paused, taking another sip of his whiskey. When his son wanted to sell the place 6 months ago, I bought it for one reason, to preserve that spirit. Real class isn't about designer labels or social media followers. It's about dignity, respect, and treating everyone like they matter. Miguel, still standing nearby, straightened up a little taller. The older couple at the next table nodded approvingly. Even some of the young influencers had put down their phones, caught up in the moment. So, Oliver continued, fixing Emma with that steady gaze. The question isn't whether I belong here. The question is whether you understand what this place really stands for. Emma's eyes filled with tears, reality crashing down around her carefully constructed worldview. But what happened next surprised everyone, especially her. I could fire you right now, Oliver said, his voice gentler now. But that's not what this place is about. Instead, I'm going to give you a choice. He gestured to Miguel, who stepped forward nervously. This young man tried to warn you. He recognized me, not from social media, but because he watched my documentaries with his father. He understood something you didn't. Respect isn't about appearances. Turning to Miguel, Oliver spoke with quiet authority. Son, how would you like to start training as a waiter? We could use more people who understand what real service means. Miguel's eyes widened with disbelief and gratitude. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. As for you, Emma, Oliver continued, your choice is simple. You can walk out that door and find another job at a place more focused on modern luxury. Or you can learn from Miguel and our veteran staff about what real hospitality means. Your call. Emma wiped her eyes, looked around at the dignified faces of the longtime staff, and made her decision. I'd like to stay and learn. Sir, if you'll let me. Good choice. Oliver nodded, finishing his whiskey. Thomas, put Miguel in charge of her retraining. As the tension in the room dissolved, the older couple at the next table began to applaud. Others joined in, not for the celebrity in their midst, but for the lesson they had just witnessed. A reminder that true class has nothing to do with clothes or status, and everything to do with how we treat each other. Today, the Silver Oak remains one of LA's finest restaurants, not because of its luxury, but because of its heart. And if you stop by on a Friday evening, you might just see a man in a casual polo shirt sitting at his usual corner table, quietly ensuring that the old values of respect and dignity live on. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this story about real class and timeless values, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments about a time when someone judged you wrong and how you handled it. See you in the next video.